This wasn't supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It was supposed to be hers. And somewhere between the rehearsal dinner and the moment a stranger pressed a folded napkin into my palm, I realized I had walked my only daughter straight into a man's trap. My name is Wendell. I'm 68 years old, a retired civil engineer from outside Asheville, North Carolina, and I've spent the last 9 years living alone in the house my wife and I built back in 1994. Her name was Corinne. She passed in the spring of 2017, and I have not slept a full night since. I tell people I have. I lie about it because the truth makes them uncomfortable. The truth is, I wake up at 3 in the morning every single day, and I sit on the back porch with a cup of black coffee until the sun comes up over the ridge, and I talk to her like she's still in the kitchen behind me. My daughter Bryn is the only thing I have left of her. Bryn has Corinne's laugh. She has Corinne's stubborn chin and the way she rubs her left earlobe when she's nervous. She turned 31 this past February, and she works as a pediatric oncology nurse at Mission Hospital. When she was 9 years old, she sat on the edge of our bathtub and told me very seriously that she was going to grow up and help the kids who don't have hair. She kept that promise. I have never been more proud of another human being in my entire life. So when she called me last August and said, "Daddy, I'm getting married," I cried. I'm not ashamed of that. I cried right there in the produce section of the Ingalls on Hendersonville Road. A woman picking out cantaloupes asked if I was all right, and I told her my baby was getting married, and she hugged me. That's the kind of place this is. That's the kind of life I thought we were heading into. The man's name was Garrett. Garrett Pemberton Vance. The hyphenated name should have been my first warning, because around here a hyphen is usually a man trying to convince you he's worth two names. He was 36, originally from somewhere outside Charleston, and he told me he ran a private wealth advisory firm with offices in Charlotte and Atlanta. He drove a black Range Rover. He wore loafers without socks, even in November. He called me sir with a smile that never quite reached his eyes, and the very first time I shook his hand, something inside my chest tightened up like a fist. I dismissed it. That was my mistake. I told myself I was just an old man being protective. I told myself Corinne would have said, "Wendell, you can't measure a man by his shoes." I told myself Bryn was a grown woman, a smart woman, a nurse who saw human nature at its rawest every single day, and if she trusted him, then who was I to interfere? The engagement lasted 10 months. In those 10 months, I saw Garrett a total of 4 times. 4. He was always traveling, always closing a deal, always apologizing through a text message that Bryn would read out loud to me, with this careful, defensive cheerfulness in her voice, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Once, when he was supposed to come to Easter dinner, he canceled at 9 in the morning, citing a client emergency in the Caymans. I made a ham anyway. Bryn came alone. She ate 2 slices and cried in the guest bathroom, and when she came out, she said her allergies were acting up. I let her say it. The wedding was set for the second Saturday in October. They chose a place called Cedar Brook Estate, a restored 1920s mansion outside Brevard, with a long sloping lawn and a white tent and string lights running through the dogwoods. It cost a small fortune. Garrett paid for most of it. I offered to contribute, and Bryn said, "He says it's his gift to you, Daddy. He says you've already given enough." I let that one slide too. I'm a man who has spent his whole life letting things slide. I am trying very hard now not to be that man anymore. The rehearsal dinner was on Friday night at a steakhouse downtown. Garrett's side of the family was small. His mother, a tight-lipped woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Vance with no first name offered. A younger brother named Tatum who couldn't look anyone in the eye. No father, no grandparents, no college friends, no groomsmen who'd known him longer than 2 years. His best man was a business partner from Charlotte, who he'd met by his own admission 18 months ago. I sat across from Bryn at the long table and watched her smile and laugh, and I felt that fist in my chest squeeze tighter. "Corinne, if you can hear me," I thought. "I don't know what to do." The morning of the wedding was bright and cool and smelled like wood smoke. I woke up at 3, like always. I made my coffee. I sat on the porch. I pulled out the small velvet box that held Corinne's wedding band. I'd had it cleaned and polished, and I'd put it on a thin silver chain because Bryn had asked if she could wear it under her dress, against her heart. I cried again. Then I put on my suit. The navy one Corinne had picked out for me the year before she died, and I drove the 40 minutes to Brevard with the windows down. The estate was already buzzing when I arrived at 1 in the afternoon. The ceremony was at 4. I went up to the bridal suite to see Bryn, and she was sitting in front of a tall oval mirror in her dressing robe with 2 stylists working on her hair. She turned and looked at me, and for 1 second she was 9 years old again. Sitting on the bathtub edge, she said, "Daddy, do I look okay?" And I said, "Sweetheart, you look like your mother." She started crying, and I held her. And then a coordinator with a clipboard told me politely that I needed to go because they had to finish hair and makeup. I kissed Bryn on the top of her head, and I walked out into the long carpeted hallway, and that is when it happened. A woman was standing by the linen cart at the end of the hall. She was maybe 55, 60, in a gray uniform with a name tag I couldn't read from that distance. Hispanic, short, with her hair pulled back in a tight, low bun. She was holding a stack of folded towels. As I walked past her, she said quietly, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, "Señor, please." I stopped. I turned. I thought she was asking me for something. Directions, maybe. She took a step closer, and she looked left and right down that empty hallway, and she pressed something into my hand. A folded paper napkin. Then she said, in English with a soft accent, "Please, do not let your daughter sign anything today. Please. I'm sorry. I have grandchildren." And she walked away. I stood there in that hallway with the napkin in my hand and the chandelier humming above me, and I felt my heart go cold all the way through. I unfolded the napkin. There was writing on it in pen, in a careful hand, that someone had clearly practiced before committing to. It said, "He was married before. She died. Ask about Savannah." That was all. 3 sentences. No signature. No phone number. I want you to understand something. I am an engineer. I have spent my whole adult life believing in evidence, in load-bearing walls, in numbers that add up. I do not believe in signs from the universe. I do not believe in fate, but I will tell you that in the moment I read that napkin, I felt my wife's hand on the back of my neck as clearly as I have felt anything in 9 years. I felt Corinne say, very softly, "Find her." I put the napkin in my breast pocket. I went down the back staircase to the kitchen. I asked the catering manager very politely who the woman was who had been folding towels in the upstairs hallway. He looked confused. He said all the housekeeping staff at Cedarbrook were employed directly by the estate, not by his catering company, and he didn't know any of them by name. He suggested I ask the estate manager. I went to the estate manager. A young woman with a tablet. I described the woman. Gray uniform, low bun, maybe in her late 50s. The estate manager frowned and tapped her tablet and said, "Sir, we have 3 housekeepers on staff today. None of them match that description. Are you sure you weren't speaking with one of the caterers?" I was sure. I walked outside into the gardens. It was 2 o'clock. The ceremony was in 2 hours. Guests were already arriving in clusters. Women in fall colors. Guests were already arriving in clusters. Women in dark suits. I found a bench under a pergola behind the carriage house, and I sat down and I pulled out my phone. I am 68 years old, but I'm not a man who can't use a search engine. I typed in, "Garrett Pemberton Vance, Savannah, Georgia wife, died." The first result was an obituary from the Savannah Morning News dated June of 2019. The woman's name was Marisol Pemberton Vance, age 29, of Savannah, Georgia. She had passed away suddenly at home after a brief illness. She was survived by her husband, Garrett Pemberton Vance, no children. The obituary was 4 sentences long. There was no photograph. The second result was a blog post, not a news article. A blog post written by a woman named Yolanda, Dated November of 2019, 5 months after the death. The blog was titled, Justice for Marisol. I clicked on it. I read it. I read it twice. Yolanda was Marisol's older sister. According to her, Marisol had met Garrett in late 2017. They married in February of 2018 after a 4-month engagement. Marisol came from a Cuban-American family in Savannah, a family with a small but successful chain of restaurants. Her grandfather had built that business from nothing. When her grandfather died in early 2019, Marisol inherited a controlling stake in the company. 3 months later, she was dead. Yolanda wrote that the death had been ruled an accidental overdose. Marisol had no history of drug use. Marisol had been actively trying to get pregnant. Marisol had called Yolanda the week before her death and said she was thinking about leaving Garrett because she'd discovered he'd been moving money out of her accounts into something called a trust that she had supposedly signed paperwork for, but had no memory of signing. The police investigated. There was no evidence of foul play. The case was closed. Garrett inherited everything because Marisol's will, which had been updated 2 months before her death, named him as sole beneficiary. Yolanda's blog had a single comment under it. The comment was from a woman who said she'd worked as Marisol and Garrett's housekeeper. The comment said, "I tried to warn her. I am so sorry. I should have tried harder." The comment was signed D. I sat on that bench for a long time. I think I forgot how to breathe for a minute or two. Then I stood up, and I walked back into the estate, and I went looking for that woman. I found her in a side hallway between the kitchen and the laundry room. She was sitting on a step stool with her face in her hands. When she saw me coming, she stood up fast and looked like she might run. I held up both my hands and said, "Please, please, I just need to talk to you. My name is Wendell. My daughter is the bride." She started to cry, quietly, without sound, just tears running down her face. She told me her name was Delia. She had worked for Garrett and Marisol in Savannah from 2018 until Marisol's death. She had cleaned their home twice a week. She had loved Marisol. She had loved Marisol. She said Marisol had been kind to her, had paid for her son's eye surgery, had treated her like family. After Marisol died, Garrett had let Delia go with a generous severance and a non-disclosure agreement. Delia had taken the money because she had 3 grandchildren and a husband on dialysis. She had moved to North Carolina to be near her daughter. 6 months ago, Delia had taken a part-time job at Cedarbrook Estate. 2 weeks ago, she had been doing turn-down service in the bridal suite where the bride's belongings had been stored ahead of the wedding weekend, and she had seen the groom's name on a card sitting on the dresser. She had nearly fainted. She had spent 2 weeks praying, she said. She had spent 2 weeks asking God what to do. She had decided that if she did nothing and another woman died, she would not be able to face her grandchildren. She had written that napkin the night before. She had hidden in the hallway hoping I would walk by alone. I asked her if she would be willing to come with me right now and tell my daughter what she had told me. She said yes. She said she had been ready to lose her job over this. She had already lost so much sleep that her job didn't matter anymore. It was 2:37. The ceremony was in 83 minutes. We went upstairs together. The bridal suite was full of women, bridesmaids in champagne-colored dresses, my sister, Patrice, doing Brennan's veil, the photographer setting up by the window. I asked, as steadily as I could, for everyone to please give my daughter and me 5 minutes alone. Patrice took one look at my face and started ushering people out. When the door closed, Brennan turned around in her dress, and she was so beautiful I could not stand it. "Daddy," she said. "What's wrong?" I sat her down. I held both her hands. I told her there was a woman with me who needed to tell her something, and that I needed her to listen, and that whatever she decided after she had listened, I would stand behind her 100%. She nodded slowly. Her left hand went up to her earlobe. I opened the door, and Delia came in. Delia told the story. All of it. The marriage in Savannah. Marisol's inheritance. The trust paperwork. Marisol's growing fear. The phone call to her sister. The overdose. The will that no one in the family had known existed. The NDA. The years of nightmares. The card on the dresser 2 weeks ago. Delia spoke for maybe 12 minutes without stopping. She cried through some of it. I cried through more of it. Bryn did not cry. Bryn's face went perfectly, terribly still. When Delia was finished, Bryn said, very quietly, "Daddy, get me my phone." I got her phone. She made one call to her best friend, Marin, who was a paralegal at a law firm in Asheville. She asked Marin to pull up something she had asked Garrett to sign 3 weeks ago. Some kind of prenuptial document that he had instead sent her something to sign. She had signed it without reading it carefully because, in her own words, I trusted him. She wanted Marin to read it to her right now. Marin read it. It was not a prenup. It was a post-nuptial style asset transfer agreement, drafted in such a way that upon their legal marriage, certain accounts of Bryn's, including the trust her grandmother had set up for her when she was born, which had grown to a not insignificant sum, would be placed under a joint management vehicle that Garrett alone had signing authority over. The language was buried on page 11. Bryn had signed page 14. Bryn closed her eyes. She did not cry. She breathed in. She breathed out. She opened her eyes and she said, "Daddy, where is he?" He was downstairs in the groom's lounge with his groomsmen having a bourbon. I want to tell you that I am a calm man. I want to tell you that I went down those stairs with measured steps and a level head. I did not. I went down those stairs with my daughter holding my left arm and Delia following behind us, and I had Corinne's wedding band in my breast pocket on its silver chain, and I had not felt that kind of cold fury since the day the oncologist told us there was nothing more they could do. I knocked on the door of the groom's lounge. Garrett opened it himself, smiling, the bourbon in his other hand. He saw Bryn in her dress, and his face did something strange. A flicker. Just for a second. He said, "Sweetheart, it's bad luck." Bryn said, "Tell me about Marisol." I have never in my life seen the color drain out of a human being's face the way it drained out of his. He looked past her at me, then past me at Delia, then back at Bryn. He started to speak. Bryn held up her hand. "Don't," she said. "Don't make it worse. I just need you to confirm. Were you married to a woman named Marisol Pemberton Vance, who died in Savannah in June of 2019? There was a long, long silence. His groomsmen behind him had gone very quiet. He said, "Bryn, I can explain." She said, "That's a yes." She turned around. She walked out of that room and across the foyer and out the front door of the estate in her wedding dress, and I walked behind her, and Delia walked behind me. Garrett came after us. He was saying her name. He was saying it was complicated. He was saying she was overreacting. I turned around at the bottom of the front steps. I am not a violent man. I have never hit another human being in my life. I did not hit him then. I just stood between him and my daughter, and I said, "You are going to stop walking. You are going to go back inside. You are going to tell those guests there will be no wedding. And then you are going to leave this state because by tomorrow morning, my daughter's attorney will be on the phone with the Chatham County Sheriff's Office in Savannah, and they are going to want to take another look at how Marisol died." He said, "You can't prove anything." I said, "I don't have to, but somebody else is going to try." He looked at me for a long moment. He looked like he wanted to say something. Then his shoulders dropped, and he turned around, and he walked back up the steps and into the estate, and we never saw him again. Bryn told the guests herself. She walked back into the foyer, into the assembled crowd that had been ushered inside, and she stood at the top of the staircase in her wedding dress with her veil still pinned in her hair, and she said, in a voice that did not shake, "There isn't going to be a wedding today. I'm sorry you came. I'm grateful you came. The food is paid for. Please stay and eat. I love you all." Then she walked back upstairs and changed into jeans. We drove home that night, the three of us, in my old truck. Bryn in the middle seat. Delia by the window with her hands folded in her lap. We stopped at a Waffle House outside Hendersonville and ate hash browns at 11 o'clock at night, and Bryn laughed once, a short, startled laugh, when Delia said her grandson called Waffle House the yellow place. It was the first laugh out of my daughter that whole night, and I held on to it like a coin. It has been 7 months now. Bryn's attorney did contact the sheriff's office in Chatham County. They reopened the case. I don't know yet what will come of it. These things move slowly, and the truth is that proving something 7 years after the fact is hard, and Garrett has money, and money buys delay. But Marisol's sister Yolanda flew up from Savannah to meet Bryn and Delia in person, and the three of them sat in my living room and held each other and cried, and Yolanda told us that just knowing someone had finally listened was more than she had hoped for in 5 years. Garrett is gone. He shut down his firm. Last I heard, he was in Belize. I hope he stays there. Delia is my friend now. Real friend. She comes over for dinner once a week with her husband, and her grandchildren call me Mr. Turvier, W, and the youngest one, who is 4, calls Bryn the nurse lady and gives her hand-drawn pictures of stick figures with no hair, which makes my daughter cry every single time. Delia did not lose her job at Cedarbrook. The owner, when I called him and told him the whole story, gave her a raise. Bryn moved back home for a few months. She slept in her old room. We didn't talk much about Garrett. We talked about her mother. She wore Corinne's wedding band on its silver chain every day, against her heart, exactly as she had planned to do on her wedding day. She moved back into her own place in April. She's seeing someone new, very slowly, very carefully. He's another nurse from her hospital. His name is Owen. He's been to dinner at my house 3 times. He helped me fix a leak under the kitchen sink the second time he came over, and he did not act like he was doing me a favor. The first time he met me, he shook my hand and looked me in the eye, and I felt the fist in my chest unclench just a little. I still wake up at 3 in the morning. I still talk to Corinne on the porch, but these days I have something new to tell her. I tell her about Bryn. I tell her that our daughter is all right. I tell her that a stranger in a gray uniform pressed a folded napkin into my hand, and that I think it was the bravest thing one person has ever done for another, and that I think she had something to do with it. Corinne, I think she did. I'm an engineer. I'm supposed to believe in evidence. I'm supposed to believe in load-bearing walls and numbers that add up. But I sat on a bench under a pergola on the day my daughter was supposed to get married, and I felt my dead wife's hand on the back of my neck, and I will believe that until I see her again. If you are a father listening to this, and your daughter is bringing home a man whose past you have never quite been able to see all the way around, I am asking you, please, ask the question. Make the call. Pay the lawyer. Be the inconvenient old man. Be the embarrassment. Be the one who ruins the dinner. There is no apology you will ever owe her that is bigger than the apology you will owe yourself if you stay quiet. I almost stayed quiet. I almost let it slide, the way I have let every uncomfortable thing slide for 68 years. A woman I did not know saved my daughter's life because she could not face her own grandchildren if she did nothing. I think about that every single morning, sitting on my porch in the dark, watching the sun come up over the ridge. I think about it, and I drink my coffee, and I say thank you out loud to nobody in particular. Then I go inside and I start the day. I've thought about that napkin almost every morning since. 3 sentences on a folded paper square, written by a woman who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, and they were what stood between my daughter and a man who had already buried 1 wife. I keep coming back to a simple truth that I did not understand for most of my life. Every outcome in this world has a cause. Garrett did not appear in our lives by accident, and he did not get as far as he did by magic. He got there because I let small warnings slide, because Brennan wanted to believe the best of someone, because Marisol's family, years ago, had been worn down by grief and by the official-sounding finality of a closed case file. Cause and effect. Quiet seeds, loud harvests. The moment I stopped letting things slide, the chain broke. What saved my daughter that afternoon was not luck. It was 3 things working together inside one frightened housekeeper named Delia. The first was a sense of right and wrong so stubborn that 2 years of nightmares could not wear it down. She had taken severance money, signed papers, kept her head down, and still her conscience would not let her rest. That is the kind of inner compass I want for myself in the years I have left. The second was a clear head under pressure. She did not panic. She did not run to the bride and cause a scene. She studied the situation, found the one person who could act on the information, wrote the message in the fewest words that would do the job, and waited in a hallway for her chance. That is real intelligence. Not degrees on a wall, the wit to see a problem clearly and answer it well. The third was the plain, hard courage to walk up to a stranger in a tuxedo and risk her livelihood for a woman she had never met. She had a husband on dialysis. She had grandchildren who depended on her paycheck. She did it anyway. I want to be like Delia when I grow up, and I am 68 years old. If you are listening to this and there is a small voice in your chest telling you something is wrong about a person in your child's life, do not argue with that voice. Sit with it. Ask the inconvenient question. Pay the lawyer. Make the embarrassing phone call. Be the father who ruins the rehearsal dinner if it comes to that. Build the strength of character inside yourself to act on what you already know. Sharpen the mind to look past charm and into facts, and find the nerve to speak up when speaking up is the hardest thing in the room. Bryn is alive and free this morning because one woman did exactly that for a stranger. I am still learning to do it for the people I love. I hope you will start learning too.